So, I'm not a believer in small casks. So everything we mature, we actually do in full-size barrels or casks. So they are from 185 up to 250 liters approximately, more or less 200 liters. That's where we actually have the best ratio between volume and surface area. Okay. But what actually happens during maturation is an oxidation, more or less, and also actually a mix of chemical reactions and biological reactions. So actually when we put spirit into the cask, all of a sudden it becomes summer, and of course the spirit expands, starts going out in the wood. When it gets out in the wood, it starts to react with the acids, the flavor components, the wood components, the lignin or whatever, the wood sugars. Then all of a sudden it becomes winter again, and it goes back into the wood or into the cask. And with an excess of wood sugars, the lignin, the acids, they start to react with the alcohol. And then an oxidation starts to take place and some other chemical reactions. And this transportation more or less needs to be done 4 times before you actually have something that's flavorly or tastes remotely good. And that's why we have the 3-year rule on traditional whiskey, 2 or 4 years on American whiskey, for example. But end of the day, if we decide all of a sudden in our warehouses that midst winter we actually heat up the warehouses, and midsummer we cool them down, then we would get 2 years maturation out of 1 year. Another aspect we could work with, of course, is that we could affect the temperature, and that also, the humidity in the air, because that will affect how we actually have the osmosis or the actual the different forces forcing the alcohol, the acids going back or forth. Yet another option is to actually infuse some kind of sound or vibration. That would again help some of the chemical reactions, because it's more or less of a catalyst. Mm-hmm. So we could have a product like we have now, when we're going to go up and see the laboratory as well, but we could see the exact same maturation key figures on a 4 or 5 year old whiskey here that we have on a 12 or 15-year-old traditional Scottish whiskey, just by affecting or using these different characters without actually doing chemical work. It's just affecting simple factors without doing something that's too strange. Again, of course, it also matters what kind of wood. Besides, of course, most of what we use is oak, but again, there's about 300 different varieties of oak, whereof about 50 suitable for maturing wines and spirits, and of those 50, it's about 20 suitable for maturing whiskey. So, of course, the special variety is important. Most of what we use is Quercus Mulbergensi, some Chinkopin, some Burr Oak, some Swamp Oak, but also Quercus Petrea, for example, Rosacea, Mitsunari, all of them giving us different chemical or congeners that will give us different characters. But again, of course, it depends on where the oak has grown.
In Canada, Crown Royal is very popular.
Yep.
What do they use?
I wouldn't dare to say, but I would say most of it comes from American oak and Quercus alba, and I would say more or less certain that it would be one of the not so expensive varieties of Quercus alba. I would probably say mainly Burr Oak. So of course, but again, as with wines, terroir is extremely important, where the oak is actually grown. So of course, we extract some minerals and some flavor components if it's grown in Allier forest or Bouchard or Ozarks or Missouri, Tennessee, wherever. So when we started out with this, what I actually got my head most into was actually terroir, where the oak is grown, and of course the variety. So more or less from all casks we have here, we could actually say the GPS coordinate of the cask where the oak has grown. And from that we could actually see, even if we do a mix of 3 or 4 different batches, so we know the spirit is homogeneous, and we put it into 2 different oak casks, and the oaks has grown just 50 yards apart, and we let it mature for 3 or 4 years, we could get different flavor components out. But generally we could predict it rather well, depending on where it's grown and minerals and so forth.
So each one of these barrels is of a different oak right now, or is this all the same?
Yeah, I tend to want, when I do my orders for the oak, I want one oak cask is one oak. Generally we get 3 to 4 casks out of an oak. So we have a deal with a very big whiskey manufacturers in the United States. So we actually, when we bring down the wood, we'll let the log rest for a couple of months. Then we cut out the staves. All wood we have here is air dried. It's no kiln dried, no strange microwaves or saline solutions or whatever. So it's air dried, minimum 36 months, most often up to 48 or 60 months. So it's air dried. So we cut out the stave, let it air dry for the number of months. Then we bring in the staves, we build together the cask, and then we put it into production. But the staves we don't use, we let to another distiller. So more or less, one cask is one GPS coordinate, is one oak. When we do find that the whiskies, or other products for that matter, if it's the aquavit for example, when we have casks that are ready for bottling, we mix batches of up to about 25 to 30 casks. That gives us about 10,000 liters, and we bring that to bottling.
Now is this all whiskey here? Everything you see here?
No, most of it's whiskey. We have some apple brandy, we have some gin that we mature. We haven't released that on the market yet, but we have quite a lot of gin. We have what we call beet rum, still not released on the market either, but it's more or less a rum that made from sugar beet. It goes more to the agricole rum variety.
How long does this sit here for? These ones here, how long do they stay?
Most of these are fairly young, the ones in here. I would say there are probably some being up to 5-6 years old, but otherwise it's 3 or 4 years old.
Okay.
We have 2 people working the bottling line here. So obviously the first machine here is where we wash the bottle, we insure it, we fill it and cork the bottles, and then it's brought into to labeling, and of course front label, back label, and it also gets its traceability code. See the bottle here. So obviously labels on, and also gets its the vintage code or the batch code, and a unique number for the bottle. And that's also laser encoded within the bottle and on the cork. So these 3 numbers should always be the same, otherwise it's a fake or something else. And from this code, we could actually go back and we could see, okay, what date it was bottled, from what batch, what cask we blended together, where the oak has grown, who peed on the oak before they actually brought it down, who made the cask, who did the distillation, where comes the wheat from, and everything else. So quite a good traceability on each product. And again, all and everything we do is completely organic as well. Obviously, we do all the curves from it, so we actually see what kind of different components we would get out. And mainly we do that in the 2 machines here. The HPLCs, where we get some of the longer or the liquid phase congeners. But of course, most of it through the GCNS or GCFID, where we do partly the analyzing of the different products to actually see what we get out, but also quantifying if there is anything harmful like ethyl carbamate or plasticizers, phenol levels or whatever. But also what it gives us is very good. Do you have a poster on up here?
You didn't.
That was a poster on.
En annan mapp. Jag vill se.
I guess let's go.
Jag ser MS.
Den filmen är inte bra. Det är bara visat på topp. So, we get a cost sample, for example, or even if we're going to do a gin, we want to know that, okay, we've fulfilled the same criteria, going to taste the same all the way through, and we wanted to fulfill all those requirements. But also, of course, when we mix a whiskey, for example, we're going to mix 10 or 20 or 30 casks together. Just taking one cask is kind of like listening to a violin player or whatever. Okay, that could be very nice for about 5 minutes, but if you're going to make a sauce or an orchestra or whatever, you need to have different instruments, and you need to know that they could play together. They could be extremely good, but a hockey or a football team of just forwards, it wouldn't work. So from here we could actually just bring out a curve, and we go into this, for example. Okay, we'll say this one, what's that? And we say, okay, what's that? We say, okay, in this it's Urbana mead, so it's an extraction, in this case from actually from wood, in this case. So we can actually look in and we can see what it works for and what it is, quantify it, and we can see, okay, what do we need to lift? Do we need another cask of French cask here, or a certain wine cask or whatever, or do we need to take something down? Okay, would this cask be better off maturing for another 2 years or whatever? So it's a very good tool for us. So quite unique. I think there's about 4 or 5 of these machines in Europe right now, and all the other ones work with medicines or universities. This is the only one I know of that actually works with beverages. So it's quite unique. So we not only do analysis for ourselves, but also for a lot of other manufacturers and producers.